Well, lawmakers and the Trump administration officials expected to make major revisions to the Payment Protection Program to give small businesses more leeway on how they can spend government-backed pandemic relief funds. Let's bring in Gene Marks now. He is the CPA at the Marks Group and a small business consultant, joining us now via Skype. So, Gene, let's start about this news with the PPA there in the headlines. New guidelines, I understand, issued by the Treasury Department 2 days ago, as I said, with more spending leeway, but also some restrictions specifically pertaining to loan forgiveness, which is what most small businesses rely on. So, Gene, what stands out to you?
So, Arthel, good to see you. Yes, the SBA and the Treasury Department did release new guidelines on Friday for businesses to follow because, Arthel, the big issue that we have right now is among the small businesses that have received the loans and even the ones that are waiting to get the loans, how will these loans be forgiven? So there were a lot of questions about the types of expenses that are allowed and the types of payroll costs that could be forgiven as well, the period that it could be forgiven. So without getting into all the details here, my recommendation is go to the SBA's website at sba.gov. The new guidelines are there, and that way, as you're starting to track your expenses and want to get forgiveness, those guidelines are, you can follow them. Unfortunately, there are some big issues that are still open, Arthel. I mean, one of the biggest is that a lot of small business owners are concerned that there's an 8-week period of expenses that can be forgiven, and it starts when you get the loan, and a lot of businesses aren't open yet, or they're just starting to open, so they don't have those kinds of payroll expenses to be forgiven. So as you mentioned earlier, big changes could be on the way. The Treasury Department and Congress in another stimulus bill could be making more changes that will extend that 8-week period, and also hopefully the mix of expenses that you can use, whether it's payroll and some other operating expenses. So fingers crossed that those changes come sooner rather than later.
Well, perhaps that's in the leeway that they're saying that there's more leeway for these for the PPP. Maybe that's part of it.
It is. Well, right now, the only leeway that it's been given has to do with your like certain specifics on the actual what exists right now. So, for example, some people are asking if they pay their payroll right now, can they get forgiven if they've incurred it, but they haven't paid it yet? And there are new guidelines that give you some guidance on doing that. Other people were saying, gee, can I get forgiveness for certain types of rent expense that I pay? Is it just on my office? Or how about if I'm renting a piece of equipment, something like that? Again, the SBA
or a booth at a hair salon.
Correct. So if you're running a hair salon, for example, you've got equipment and you've got your rent as well. Now the SBA is given more leeway and also more guidance for what will be forgiven, which is good news.
Okay, that is good news. Let's move on to this. Listen, millions of Americans are relying on stimulus checks and unemployment. So are stimulus checks tax-free? Are unemployment checks tax-free? In other words, do you have to pay taxes on either?
So the stimulus checks are tax-free. So the people that are getting those stimulus checks now would not have to pay taxes on that. But unemployment is not tax-free. So whatever compensation you're getting under unemployment from your state, including the additional federal add the $600 a week through the end of July, all of that is still taxable. And that's very important that you bring up, Arthel, because a lot of people, like hair salons, for example, a hairstylist might be an independent contractor, and they're trying to figure out, should I get unemployment or should I apply for the Paycheck Protection Program? And you can do both, but you can only choose one. Your unemployment might be less than you think because it is taxable. Okay,
so let me jump in right there. So here's a scenario. You apply for an SBA loan, okay, for the small business loan. You give your EIN and your social security number. If you employ yourself through your business, okay, are you also eligible to receive a stimulus check?
So yeah, a stimulus check you are still eligible to receive personally, assuming that you meet some of the income criteria, but you are still eligible to receive a stimulus check. If you apply for the SBA loan, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, and you apply for unemployment, which you can apply for both, but you can only take one or the other. In other words, no double dipping. And the reason, Arthel, is that say you're getting money forgiven for your payroll through the Paycheck Protection Program, you can't also be receiving unemployment income as well for that 8-week period of forgiveness. So again, just to recap, you can get a stimulus check if you're also applying for an SBA loan, but you cannot get both unemployment and the Paycheck Protection loan money at the same time. It's an overlap. It's like double dipping. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Thank you. Finally, you've got female-owned and African-American-owned businesses saying they are at the end of the line for SBA and PPP payouts. So how can they move closer to the front of the line to get the assistance that they desperately need?
That is such a great question. Unfortunately, a lot of minority-owned businesses have not been receiving loans to the same extent as others. Some, in a lot of cases, is just education. They're not aware of the loans that are available to them, or maybe they're not used to getting these loans, because they haven't seeked that kind of funding out. My advice, if you're a minority-owned business, you should be aggressively calling up your local bankers. I recommend a good local community bank, making sure they're aware of you and asking for help to apply for these loans. Some people I've talked to that are minority-owned businesses weren't even aware that they were eligible or had never had a banking relationship before. Now is the time, Arthel, of any time to start a good banking relationship. So talk to your community banker, a good independent banker, introduce yourself, and aggressively say, I want to apply for these SBA-backed loans. Please help me. You will find a lot of great bankers who are there to help you do that.
Gene Marks, @Gene Marks. Thank you.